Welcome in to another edition of Believe in Kentucky. I'm your host, Aaron Gershon, and for the first time in the history of this show, I am riding solo. I think in the what are we at? Almost 3 years of doing this show. I don't think Vinny Hardy has missed an episode, and he's held it down solo many a time. So we're giving him a break while he's on a trip and filling in here live from Indianapolis, Indiana. Same, not to bring bad juju in right away, but the same media hotel that we stayed in the last time Kentucky played an NCAA tournament in Indy, and that would have been, of course, the St. Peter's game in 2022. Now, this game is at Lucas Oil Stadium down the road. It's not quite at Gainbridge Fieldhouse, where we, of course, had that disaster against St. Peter's. So a little bit different, but nonetheless, there are those vibes out there. It's been a little bit of a while since Kentucky's won a big game here in Indy, but just 2 hours, 45 minutes or so up the road from Lexington. Should be an outstanding environment here Friday night for the Sweet 16, Kentucky and Tennessee. And we'll probably go about a half hour here tonight riding solo. If there's any questions in the chat, happy to get to those, as talking to yourself is not easy necessarily. So definitely looking for some input from Big Blue Nation here tonight. But I guess before we go dive in head first on this Kentucky-Tennessee trilogy that we have set up here on Sunday, just to quickly give credit to this team for what they were able to do last weekend up in Milwaukee. Just got back from Lexington late Monday night from up there. And I thought, the Troy game, you could definitely tell there were some nerves early. I didn't think Kentucky played its best game of the season by any means offensively. I think they started the night 1 for 8 from 3. Trent Noah kind of got them going there off the bench. It was down to 1 with about 3.5 minutes left in the half, 25-24 Kentucky. And then Noah hits that 3, and I believe it sparked an 8 or 10-0 run for Kentucky. They end up taking an 8-point lead into halftime, and they really got things rolling there in the second half. They went on a 16-0 run that after I think Troy cut it to 6. They went on a 16-0 run that Colin Chandler scored 9 in, and Brandon Garrison scored 5. And if you get that from those guys off the bench any given night, you got to like your chances to win. So that was my big takeaway from the Troy game. Just get over the hump of getting an NCAA tournament win. There hasn't been one of those in the first round. I mean, they've lost 2 of their last 3 in the first round going into that one. They're obviously Oakland game fresh in mind. And for Mark Pope, the big bugaboo on him, or the big thing that people were holding their pitchforks out, was that Kentucky hired a coach that had not won an NCAA tournament game. And you go look at his 2 NCAA tournament games when he was at BYU, and they were both losses to an 11 seed as a 6. So you were a little worried about Kentucky. You could definitely, the media being courtside for these games, you could tell that Mark Pope, he wasn't letting it on in press conferences and all that, but he was tense. He was nervous that whole Troy game. He didn't really crack a smile until the game was decided. And it was probably with 30 seconds left on the clock and the walk-ons were going in. So you could tell everyone was a little tense. Amari Williams, after the game, told us in the locker room that he was nervous. So the nerves were definitely there for that Troy game. You could sense it. You could see it. And luckily, it didn't do enough to lose it. And then so you get that win. And then Illinois, I'll be honest with you, and I don't remember if I said it on the show or not last week or on Big Blue Insider, where during the football and basketball seasons, you can catch me every Monday with Dick Gabriel. I had Illinois beating Kentucky in my bracket in the round of 32 because I didn't like that matchup. Illinois, a top 20 efficient offense, a top 20 tempo team. 2 or 3 of their forwards shot 35% better from 3. Those are teams that Kentucky has struggled mightily against all year. And really, from the opening tip, Kentucky was in total control. And Illinois' youth with Will Riley and that point guard from Lithuania, those 2 guys being freshmen, Kentucky really they flexed with their age. I thought those 2 kids weren't quite ready for the moment. Lamont Butler looked a lot healthier. He didn't score a single point against Troy. His defense was solid against Troy, but you could tell he looked uncomfortable out there. He throws on the little bit of a lighter brace, and that was the best Lamont Butler's played since the shoulder injury happened against Texas A&M. So super encouraging, 14 points, hits 2 threes. As soon as that first three fell, you kind of felt like it was going to be a good night for Kentucky if they were going to get that from him. Kentucky takes a 5-point lead. I think the most underrated play of the game really was in the last second and a half of the first half, where Illinois has got it down to 3, and you're kind of sensing momentum's flipping because Kentucky had been up double digits already. Illinois has got it down to 1 possession, and Kentucky wisely rolls the ball inbound, so you take the shot clock out of it. They hold on to it, and with 1.5 seconds left, Trent Noah grabs a loose ball and is able to draw a foul on a 3, and he goes 2 for 3 at the line, and Kentucky goes up 5 instead of 3 going into the half. That's a big difference to go up 2 possessions, and really, a 3 and a 2 there. And Kentucky then comes out of the locker room and goes on a 10-0 run to start the second half. And, Illinois got it to 6 with about 1:45 or so left. But the game never really felt in doubt, which is not something you could say much, honestly, all year. Kentucky's played in a lot of tight ball games outside in SEC play. They blew out LSU, they blew out South Carolina, the 2 worst teams in the league. But every other game, maybe the Missouri game to an extent, but pretty much every game they played in kind of went down to the wire. So the fact they were able to get a nice, comfortable win over a very solid Illinois team, really good signs that they're playing some of their best basketball of the year. And defensively, Big Z's brother, Tomislav Isevic, definitely hit some shots. Kylan Boswell is able to kind of get whatever he wants at the rim, which gives you concerns about 2 matchups I'll touch on in particular here with Tennessee on Friday. But other than that, I thought Kentucky played a fantastic defensive game. They continue to make great strides on that end of the floor. Kentucky's now 45th in KenPom defensive efficiency after they gave up 98 points at Ole Miss back on February 4th. They ranked 112th in offensive efficiency. So quite the turnaround on that end of the court. And I think, their defense won them that game. Obviously, Kobe Brea went unconscious for about a 3-minute stretch there in the second half. Otega Oweh went unconscious, and Kentucky started the half 9 for 10 from the field. But they won that game on the defensive end. Really, they won both games on the defensive end. And that's huge as Kentucky looks to continue going deeper in this tournament. And for the first time in 6 years, we'll play a game during the second weekend here of the NCAA tournament on Friday night. Sweet 16 action, Midwest Regional, Lucas Oil Stadium, Kentucky and Tennessee. Now, this matchup is the most commonly played game in the SEC in conference history. The 2 teams, this will be battle 242. But first ever. That's right. First ever in the NCAA tournament between these 2 longtime rivals. So a historic matchup indeed. And you kind of feel like the pressures, before I get into the matchup, and saw a question here in the chat that we'll see if I can get that on the screen. First time running the stream yard, win or lose, what's going to happen? We'll get to that in a second. But you kind of feel like the pressure's on Tennessee because the Vols have never been to a Final Four. Tennessee going into this year was the team with a lot of expectations, where Kentucky, first-year head coach, like no one really knew what was going to happen. Now, it's hard to say Kentucky's playing with house money because their name is Kentucky. Like you ever hear, whether it's realistic or not, it's championship or bust expectations. But Tennessee's the team that this year, Kai Ziegler's in his last dance, Jemai Mashak's in his last dance, Jordan Gainey's in his last dance. They have a lot of veteran pieces. They have a 70-year-old head coach who has done fantastic things at wherever he's been. George Mason, Providence, Texas, Coach Kevin Durant, Tennessee, taking that program to new heights. But the one thing that's missing from his resume is the Final Four. And Tennessee, even with all the legendary players that have gone in and out of that program, from Bernard King to Allen Houston to Chris Lofton, no Final Fours to show for it. So last year they get to the Elite Eight for, I believe it was the first time in school history. They lose to Purdue, who obviously went on to the national championship game. And now Kentucky standing in their way, their longtime nemesis. And for them, it's like, all right, if we're going to, you kind of feel like if Tennessee wins this game, not Houston's going to be really tough, assuming they get by Purdue, but you kind of feel like it's kind of meant to be that they finally get to the Final Four for it to have to come through Kentucky. And of course, you go back to the regular season, and Kentucky beat Tennessee twice. And the old adage is it's really hard to beat the same team 3 times, and I totally agree with that. But I still rather be the team that has won twice. I mean, there's no question about it. All the pressure is on the other side. Kentucky has had an edge in this matchup. They've been able to get open looks that other teams have not been able to get against Tennessee from 3. They shot exactly 12 for 24, which is, of course, 50% from 3 in both matchups. And Tennessee, the first time they played in Knoxville, went 11 for 45 from 3. And then they cut down on the amount of threes they took in Lexington. They only shot 18, but they only made 3. In Kentucky, really, that's what won them the game, was a 3-point line. And, I thought the game in Lexington before Lamont Butler got hurt, he really won the matchup against Zakai Ziegler, if I remember correctly. He picked his pocket for a kind of breakaway layup there right out of the gate, right after the opening tip. So this has been a good matchup for Kentucky so far in the regular season. But since Kentucky and Tennessee last met, which was on February 11th at Rupp Arena, I believe Tennessee's only lost 1 basketball game, or 2 basketball games. They lost on the road at Ole Miss, the second to last game of the regular season, and they lost to Florida in the SEC Tournament Championship game. And Chaz Lanier, newcomer of the year in the SEC, averaging 18.1 a game, 41% 3 shooter, did not shoot the ball well against Kentucky either time. He actually went 0 for 7 from 3 against Kentucky in Lexington. So you figure he's going to have a little bit more success. You just hope it's not too much more, because that things could get dicey for Kentucky. But win or lose, what's going to happen? I don't. Here's what I'll say. I think Kentucky is going to be able to have more success shooting the 3 against Tennessee than most teams still. Will they shoot 50% again? I don't know. But I think the way they cut and the way that Amari Williams puts pressure on you, with his ability to drive it from the center position. Now that Andrew Carr is fully healthy, he only played 90 seconds against Tennessee in Knoxville, and then he played 19 and didn't score a bucket from the field the game in Lexington. And you could tell he wasn't healthy at either one. I want to say, I know for a fact he did not start against Tennessee in Knoxville. Ansley Almanor, I'm going to go check on it right now, but I believe he came off the bench. It was before they inserted him back into the starting lineup. The game against Tennessee at home. I'm going to check on that right now. But regardless, I just think I think Kentucky's a bad matchup for Tennessee. And that's not me going out there and saying Kentucky's winning this game. I'm not planting my flag on that quite yet. But I think there's stuff in this matchup that holds weight. I don't think it was an anomaly that Kentucky beat them twice and did it twice shorthanded. I mean, Kentucky did not have Lamont Butler for a single second. He was inactive in Knoxville. They didn't have Jackson Robinson for a single second. He was inactive in Lexington. And if you remember, unfortunately, Lamont Butler aggravated his shoulder injury against Tennessee with 8:40, I think it was, left in the game at home. And Kentucky actually fell behind. They were down by 3. And Kentucky was still able to win, even without either Robinson or Butler, which is, to me, against this Tennessee defense that ranks number 2 in the country, I believe, defensive efficiency, just mucks things up. They played a very slow pace. They want to methodically score on you, and defensively, they just want to make it as ugly, grimy, tough as possible. And they're really good. They're I think they're the second or third best 3-point defense in the country, and they're really tough to score on inside. And Kentucky has had their fair share of struggles scoring against them inside. Amari Williams did not shoot the ball great in the game in Lexington. He passed great in both games, but that was one of his. I think he only scored 4 points in that game, only had a couple of rebounds. Tennessee was able to control the glass, too, in both of these matchups, though. Illinois controlled the glass against Kentucky last week, and Kentucky was just able to score enough to where that didn't matter. So I think that's, if Tennessee's going to win the battle on the glass again, you're going to need Kentucky to continue to hit threes and make it where the scoreboard kind of cancels out the discrepancy there. But again, I like this matchup for Kentucky. I just go back to I'm not planting my flag that Kentucky's going to win this game yet, but I've been, for those that know me, pretty pessimistic in recent NCAA tournaments and recent playoff games when it comes to Kentucky basketball. I mean, again, I had Illinois in my bracket knocking off Kentucky, but for whatever reason this time, I feel a lot better and just cleaning things up. Andrew Carr was not yet in the starting lineup. So Andrew Carr has not started either one of these two games against Tennessee. And so clearly has not been ready to be at full strength quite yet. Ansley Amanor started both the games and shot the ball ridiculously well in both games. So he has not necessarily been the same guy since then, and they're going to need something from him, I think, in this one too. But also Colin Chandler's really emerged since the last time these two teams have played. But going back to this win or lose, what's going to happen? I just think it's going to be, my gut feeling is it could be, I think Kentucky can control things, or maybe they just have a terrible off night and it could be a rout one way or the other. But what it's likely going to come down to, just because it's been Kentucky's MO, win or lose most of the year, it's going to come down to the last minute. And it's going to come down to who's making shots, who's getting stops, specifically from three. And I think for Kentucky, the keys, aside from the obvious, which is Chaz Lanier and Kai Ziegler, Igor Milicic is the one I'm watching and seeing how Kentucky's guarding. Because one thing that has been a problem all year long for Kentucky is stopping these forwards/centers that shoot the three at a high clip. We saw obviously Big Z come into Rupp Arena and light up Kentucky from deep. We saw his brother do it last week at Illinois. Asa Newell of Georgia had a good night shooting against Kentucky. The big from Vanderbilt, Devin McLaughlin, had two nice shooting games against Kentucky. Like forwards, for whatever reason, whether it's Andrew Carr, Amari Williams, Brandon Garrison, Ansley Amanor, they've struggled to run out and close out on shooting forwards. And Igor Milicic at 6'10", while he didn't shoot the ball great from three in Tennessee's first two NCAA tournament games. He went 0 for 1 against UCLA, went 1 for 4 against Wofford. Even the SEC tournament, 1 for 2 against Florida, 1 for 2 against Auburn. So, 50%, that's obviously not too bad, but he did go 1 for 5 against Texas. You go look at his two games against Kentucky at Rupp Arena. Tennessee went 3 for 18. He hit all three. He went 3 for 4 from deep. And then going back to Knoxville on January 28th, game, Kentucky won 78-73. He was 4 for 8 from three. So he's a guy that's given Kentucky trouble in both games this season. And to me, they got to have better answers for him. They have to be able, whether it's Andrew Carr, Amari Williams, it doesn't matter. Whoever is his matchup, and when they go over the scouting report, this guy got to circle and make sure they're closing out on. Because if Chaz, again, you can't bank on Chaz Lanier to go for 7 again. I think he went 3 for 8 from three in the game in Knoxville. You could live with him at 3 for 8, but God forbid he goes 5 for 8 or takes 13 shots and hits 6. If Igor hits 2, you're probably losing this game. So that's to me, that's the X factor for Tennessee is Igor Milicic, and for Kentucky, I've said it all year, and the numbers back it. When Kobe Bryant shoots the ball well, Kentucky usually wins. So, yes, he's an X factor. But now he's in the starting lineup. That's kind of too easy for me. It's just someone off the bench. That the key in these that have kind of made the difference in these first two NCAA tournament wins, specifically the one against Troy, has been the guys off the bench stepping up and closing those gaps. Colin Chandler scored 9 points, hit was it 3-3? No, 2 threes and 3 free throws against Troy. And he had 6 points and played great defense, had 3 steals against Illinois. Is it going to be him again? He's a freshman. This is a tough matchup for any freshman. So will it be Ansley Amanor, who has shot the ball incredibly well against Tennessee this year? He had 13 points in the game at Rupp, and I want to say he had 12 or 14. I'm going to pull it up right now. In the game in Knoxville, he went for 12 that night. He shot 4 for 7 from 3 in the game in Knoxville. He shot 2 for 3 from 30 in the game in Lexington. So for me, Ansley Amanor is the guy I'm watching as an X factor, and Brandon Garrison, not the 3-point shooting. I think anytime he puts up a 3, you kind of hold your breath, and sometimes it goes in, and you're like, Fun fact: Kentucky, I believe, is 8-1 or 8-2 in games that Garrison's hit a 3 this year. So if he hits one, which he did in the home game against Tennessee, that's good news if you're going to get that from him. But it's more so for him to give Kentucky something on the defensive end and be able to just score when he gets the ball down low, like he did at a pretty high clip against both Troy and Illinois. I think he's going to be important. So I think it's just pivotal. Someone steps off this Kentucky bench and gives something. It just can't be on all 5 starters, especially because this game has it's Tennessee, man. It could be a very, very physical game. Kentucky obviously is without Jackson Robinson and Kirk Ariza. If somebody gets in foul trouble, not many options. So Travis Perry did not play at all against Troy. I think that was more of a coach's decision. I know he's a little banged up, and I think that's why Mark Pope said what he said during his radio show, basically saying, we're working through some injury things with him. But it really is a matter of right now, Kentucky's rotation's at 9. It's the 5 starters. It's Colin Chandler. It's Brandon Garrison. It's Ansley Almanor and Trent Noah. That's the rotation right now. So if you get a guy in foul trouble like you did with Otega Owe, I don't know if you're going to be able to get away with it the same way like he did. Otega Owe obviously got into foul trouble against Illinois. He had played only 6 minutes in the first half. If he gets into foul trouble against Tennessee, I'm just not sure you can get away with it the same way you were able to get away with it against Illinois. But I going back to the question here, win or lose, what's going to happen? I just think it's going to be physical. I think this game's going to be probably in the 70s. Maybe the rule of 71 presents itself in this game. I think that's a real possibility. And I think it's going to come down to, can Kentucky win at the 3-point line again? If they do, I feel really good. If not, I don't feel good at all. So if Kentucky's not making threes, they have no chance to win this game. They need to hit at least, they hit 12 in both of those games. I'd say 10 is the minimum. You have to hit 10 to win this basketball game. And if they don't, that means if they win and don't hit 10 threes, give Mark, I don't know why Mark Pope's already not on the wasn't on the coach of the year watch list. I think it should probably still, I think the Final Four was like Shire, Pearl. I mean, to me, it should have been Todd Golden. I don't think he's going to, I don't remember if he's in that Final Four. Rick Pitino's in there too. Whatever. But if they somehow are able to, if they're somehow able to win this game without hitting 10 threes or getting 70 points, I don't think they've won a game this year where they haven't scored 70 points. Change the rules and give Mark Pope coach of the year. That's my take on it. But I like Kentucky's chances. I really do. We'll see what happens. But I think they have a real chance to win this game and go to the Elite Eight for the first time since 2019 and, play for a chance to go to the Final Four in year 1 of the Pope era. We'll see if it happens. The line's 4.5 in favor of Tennessee. I would take the point. I would take Kentucky on the spread is my only advice I'm going to hand out now. If I'm wrong, I always lose when I bet. So is what it is. But that's kind of my thoughts on the Sweet 16. Hopefully next week we're previewing a Final Four. If not, we'll kind of autopsy the season, as Mark Pope likes to say, and we'll dig deeper into this last topic we're gonna hit before we wrap this solo episode up, and that is the transfer portal. Really, unfortunately, it is open. Not, it should be open at some point, but unfortunately, right now it's open for business, which means the 16 coaches left in the NCAA tournament have to get ready, game plan for their opponent. They have to get their players ready. They have to run practice. And they also have to contact transfer portal players and set up Zoom calls and schedule visits. It's chaos. We'll see if it's asked tomorrow. I don't think I'm going to ask it tomorrow, but we'll see if someone asks it tomorrow when Mark Pope meets the media, or even Rick Barnes, for that matter, meets the media, how many hours these guys have slept this week with everything that they have to deal with. So Kentucky, first of all, I guess he's technically, and I mean technically, a competitor of mine. He's actually going to be in my wedding, so I don't really consider him a huge rival. But Jacob Polachek on 3, KSR Plus, contacts like every dude in the portal and is able to get answers and interviews with them. So if you're not following him this portal season, you're crazy. On the Cat's Paws website, 247 affiliate, we have our transfer portal tracker up. It's free. A lot of it is honestly, crediting Jacob with his scoop, but you can find all the players Kentucky contacts through the portal, get the latest updates on each of their statuses in the portal. And then when they land elsewhere, there'll be a tracker tab to see where they end up. So this time next year, you're like, oh, Kentucky contacted so-and-so, and where did he end up? How did he do this year? You can go back to that tracker and see where they ended up. And then as well, once the season ends, and we'll see what it looks like with Kentucky players currently entering the portal, but we'll have a tab for that, and we'll have the guys, of course, that are committed to Kentucky. I expect Kentucky to take a minimum of 4 players out of the portal. Definitely one at the point guard position, definitely one at the center position, probably one at the 2 guard, and one at the 4 is my guess. And we'll see. Take Oweh's decision would also warrant a 5th and then a 3. So we'll see. We'll see exactly what Mark Pope and his staff has in the works. But as of right now, I believe the number is 13 players to have confirmed contact or could have been confirmed to be in contact with Kentucky. And I think, again, we'll dig deeper on this as things kind of heat up. And, some guys are going to make decisions quick. It could happen within the next week. So keep an eye out on that. I know for a fact a couple of these players are trying to commit by the beginning of April. Like, things are to happen quick. They're not necessarily going to take visits. It's very transactional. It's kind of like NFL free agency. These, some guys go on free agent visits still, but that's kind of a lost art with this legal tampering period they have in the NFL now. Guys usually it's just negotiated through their agent. They get the contract in and they go visit the facility once they already know they're going to be joining said team. But Kentucky-wise, again, the number's at 13. Really, I just want to hit on a couple guys, and then we're going to call it a night here. The first is Tyson or Tyson. Again, CC Jacob Polachek, please answer that question. But the transfer from North Dakota, sharpshooter, you might remember, he scored 40 points in a home game, not a road game, a home game against Alabama. Grant Nelson being from North Dakota. I forget if he played at North Dakota State or UND, but NATO, it's kind of cool. Booked a game up there, and they played up there, and North Dakota gave him a real run for their money, and Eagle staff scored 40 points in that game. He is a rising senior this past season, started all 32 games. He averaged 18.9 points. He shot 35.9% from 3, added 2.8 assists and 2.8 rebounds, added 2.4 assists. He's one that Jacob Polachek, my buddy, reported Kentucky had a Zoom meeting with today. So lots of suitors obviously in the running for him, but that's one to watch early. Another one is point guard Dedon Thomas, who's currently the number 3 player in the transfer portal per 247 Sports' rankings. 2 years of eligibility left. Have heard both Jacob reporting and from what I've heard a little bit as well. That's a guy Kentucky is very high on, a point guard from UNLV. This season, he averaged 15.6 points per game, 4.7 assists, 2.0 rebounds, shot 35.3% from 3. He was a 3rd team All Mountain West selection. There's also, we're testing my names. We'll get there. If these guys sign, I'll have their names perfectly pronounced. Like I've got Isevich down. I got Sheboy down. We can get these other ones once these guys get to campus. But I believe it's Alvaro Falagarius. He is from Spain. He has 2 years of eligibility left. He is the Horizon League Player of the Year from Robert Morris, who, if you didn't watch Robert Morris in the NCAA tournament, they gave Alabama a real scare in the round of 64 this season. This is a 6'9" forward. This is kind of be an Andrew Carr replacement. He, this past season, winning the Conference Player of the Year award, shot 41.3% from 3. That is out of 70 shot attempts. He averaged 14.1 points, 9.1 rebounds, 3.2 assists, 1.4 steals, and 1.2 blocks. That's a name, too, I've heard, not just from Jacobs reporting, but I've heard that Kentucky is going to be heavily involved with. A couple other ones before we wrap up here. Magoon Gath, who, like Lamont Butler, is a San Diego State transfer. Like Lamont Butler, is the reigning defensive player of the year in the Mountain West. He 5.8 rebounds, 2.6 blocks, 7 foot, only 205 pounds. There's definitely a need to add some girth there for him. Goth actually redshirted a year that he was teammates with Butler at San Diego State. So he was in his second year at San Diego State this past year, but he has 3 years left of eligibility. That's a name I've heard to watch. Donovan Dent, the number 2 player in the transfer portal per 247 Sports' rankings. He is a point guard from New Mexico and is the Mountain West Player of the Year, believe it or not. So clearly Mark Pope, having, he never coached in the Mountain West. I don't know. Utah was in the Big West, so or whatever conference that is that Gonzaga is in. Big West. I forget exactly what it is, but he was obviously in the WAC as well at Utah Valley, so familiar with a lot of these Western U.S. kind of Rocky Mountain type area schools. But Dent this year played 3 years for Richard Pitino, of course, Rick Pitino's son, and New Mexico this year. He was a second-team All-Mountain West guy last year, just helped New Mexico get back to the NCAA tournament, reaching that for the second straight year. This year, they won their first-round game against Marquette. On the year, averaged 20.4 points, 6.4 assists, 2.3 rebounds, 1.5 steals, shot 49% from the field and 40.9% from 3. That's 27 out of 66. So pretty staggeringly good numbers. So I'd say those are the early ones to watch the closest. Donovan Dent out of New Mexico, Magoon Goth, I believe that's how you pronounce it, out of San Diego State. Again, hope I'm pronouncing it right. I'll get it eventually if he comes to Kentucky. Alvaro Folgarius out of Robert Morris, and then Eagle Staff out of North Dakota, and Denton Thomas out of UNLV. Those are the ones I'm circling early and keeping closer tabs on than some of the other names they've reached out to, such as Nick Davidson out of Nevada. There's thinking off the top of my head, Cam Williams out of Tulane, Frankie Collins out of TCU, Lamar Wilkerson out of Sam Houston, Taylor Bowen out of Florida State, Elijah Moore out of Syracuse, and former McDonald's All-American Mackenzie Magabo, who, of course, John Calipari recruited to Kentucky a couple of years ago. He's another name that Kentucky has been in contact with. Magabo credit Jacob Polachek with that scoop. But we are going to call it an episode of Believe in Kentucky, 33 minutes talking to myself. Appreciate the interaction we did have here in the comments. Kentucky, Tennessee, Friday night. Vinny Hardy, first episode. I think he's taken off in 3.5 years. He's probably sweating this one out. He lives very close to Knoxville. Grew up, in Eastern Kentucky, where there were a lot of Vol fans. And there's no team he despises more. So, I'm sure his blood pressure will be up on Friday. We'll get his insights. Maybe he'll do a little live after the game. I'm not sure what he's got cooking up, but at the latest, we'll get what he thinks next Wednesday. I'll be here, of course, next Wednesday. We'll either autopsy the season, go over what went wrong either in the Sweet 16 or Elite 8, or I'll be in San Antonio and we'll be talking from the Final Four. So I'm hoping it's that. I've never covered Final Four before. It's the first time for me covering a second weekend. So excited about that. But again, this is Believe in Kentucky. You can find me on Twitter, Gershon99. Catspaws.com, Catspaws Magazine. Please subscribe to that. We'll have at least one more issue this season, more to come over the offseason. Then, of course, once we get into football and basketball again next year, football yearbook will be cooking on that. Hopefully we can generate some sort of excitement for the football season. But, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. We're fully in on hoops. But again, Believe in Kentucky, Aaron Gershon. Appreciate everyone listening, and have a good night.